Welcome to the Resilience Report, where each week we share the latest on companies engaging in inspirational solutions for our planet and engage with ecopreneurs and lighthouse leaders disrupting their respective industries in pursuit of better, more resilient business. I'm your host, Lauren Scott. Thank you for joining me as we dive into this week's report. While emissions often dominate the sustainability conversation, today we're shifting the spotlight to an issue just as critical: water. With climate change intensifying droughts and disrupting global water cycles, it's time we talk about solutions that are as innovative as they are essential. On this episode of the Resilience Report, we're joined by Tatiana Estevez, founder and CEO of Permalution, a climate tech company pioneering the use of fog and cloud harvesting as a viable, scalable water source. From explaining how Permalution's technology works to illustrating its impact through powerful, on-the-ground stories, Tatiana brings clarity to a topic that's both deeply technical and deeply human. We explore how fog harvesting could reshape global water security, what democratizing access to water really means, and how Permalution is already supplying water to vulnerable communities around the world. Tatiana also opens up about the funding realities of building a cleantech startup, her work empowering women in tech through her nonprofit Tech Quiero, and her long-term vision for water resilience that is as community-driven as it is forward-looking. I personally love this conversation. The water space is one that I'm less familiar with, so I really invite you to come learn along with me over the following episode. Well, welcome back to another episode of the Resilience Report. Today is going to be a fun one for our listeners because our community at the Resilience Report really loves hearing from people who are disrupting their respective industries in really creative ways and trying to find new solutions to some of the world's biggest problems. And today we have no exception and someone who is certainly shining a light on a much needed area. And we have a founder and CEO of an incredible company. So welcome to the show, Tatiana.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Thanks for having us, Permalution, on the podcast.
Well, we'll definitely want to dive into Permalution, your different solutions there. But before we do so, I maybe want to level set with our audience, because I think many of us, myself included, working in the sustainability space, I feel like so much of the story has been focused on emissions over the past few years. And the world is starting to really wake up and realize that companies, communities, we also really need to be conscious as water as a resource. And one area that we're seeing our consideration is that of water harvesting. And so this is maybe a newer idea, I think, even though probably in some ways we've been doing it for generations and generations. But could you help us to understand that at a high level what water harvesting really is?
Yeah, so water harvesting would be the collection of different water sources. What fog and cloud water collection or water harvesting, which is what we do at Permalution, falls under. It's atmospheric water harvesting or atmospheric water conversion. So we take water, in our case, from the sky, from clouds and fog, and we turn it into water. There are different practices. Rainwater, it's also water harvesting. Atmospheric water through humidity, it's also water harvesting. So there are different types, and our main focus is fog and clouds.
I would love to double click into that because I think I'm personally familiar. I've had a water barrel before for rain. We can capture it that way, but I've never really thought of capturing fog. Could you speak to what that even looks like? Because you feel like it's maybe so intangible. I think we can all feel holding rain, but maybe not so much holding fog. So what does that look like?
Yes, as rain is considered vertical precipitation, fog and clouds are considered horizontal precipitation. And we can collect up to 3 times more water than rain. By definition, fog and clouds are made of tiny particles that are suspended in the air. And we're on a mission to introduce this new water source through our world-class technology that help us collect the water that otherwise, unlike rain, fog and clouds, if we don't collect it, it goes back into the atmosphere through temperature change and is lost from the local hydric cycle.
I would just maybe love to double click for a second there as to what even brought you into this area, because this is definitely not something, again, I think we can all tangibly hold rain, but then you were looking at this at a whole different level. So what made you get into this area originally?
So that's a great question, and it's quite of a interesting story. After university, I graduated from Ottawa University. I went to California with my backpack. It was always my dream to go to California after my studies. And when I landed there in San Francisco, it was one of the worst drought seasons in the state history. It was 2015. And I remember being shocked by first, it was the first time I was in a drought impacted area. And second, I was shocked from listening to the stories of the United States losing over $250 billion because of irrigation cuts and economic losses because of the irrigation cuts. What shocked me the most was hearing that farmers were taking their lives because of these irrigation cuts and huge economic losses that they were taking on their farms and land. So I remember having all these heavy thoughts in my brain and looking out the window, and I couldn't see anything because of the fog in San Francisco. So that's when I had a bit of my eureka moment. I said, okay, why are we not using this water source? Technically, fog and clouds are tons of water that pass over our heads. And that's when I started with the idea of let's milk clouds and use the water for different applications around the world. And that is what we're doing today.
It's so fascinating and I think just makes us look at our options in a completely different way. And to your point of the reality is we're experiencing these extreme weather conditions and climate change, and it's really just intensifying with time. California is a perfect example of that. How do you see these new solutions playing a role in supporting these problems as we're increasingly seeing water-strapped areas, whether it is California or elsewhere around the world? Like, what role do you see this type of new technology playing in providing hope?
So we see it as a very central solution for all the trends that we see in climate, national security, and dialing back a little bit to what you said, some of these techniques might have been around for many, many generations and years, which is true. Fog and cloud water collection is as old as rainwater collection. We are innovating on it, adding algorithm, measuring tools, sensors, advanced materials. But at the end of the day, yes, we're going back to the best engineer of them all, Mother Nature. What we do, it's the biomimicry of what sequoias, redwoods would do. They're so tall because they irrigate on fog and clouds. And this process of adhering the droplets suspended in the air and using it as a water source, it's the biomimicry that we do in our technology at the end of the day. So these nature-based solutions are, in my opinion, what it's going to be the key. There is no one size fits all. There's no one solution that will fix a problem, especially the magnitude that we see nowadays. But a combination of these different solutions, especially based around nature-based solutions, going back to a symbiotic relationship with the planet, it's what I wish for in how we deploy our solution and other nature-based solutions. Along with carbon sequestration, they all help, but we need a combination of them all.
I love the way that you're aligning this with the way nature works. I can definitely picture the redwoods and how it was able to kind of capture that moisture on its own and grow to that magnitude. If, let's say, we were explaining it to, we'll say, my 10-year-old nephew, how would you explain your tech setup when you're going in onto a site? Because I know you've been able to set up all around the world. So what would that look like at a very, very high level, either for a 10-year-old or maybe just someone like myself who is less deep in the space?
Yes, absolutely. And please feel free to interrupt me, Sumin. If I get very technical, I'm sorry. So yes, our technology, it's separated in 3 units or 3 steps. First, we have what we call the fog atlas. This is an algorithm that pinpoints where the equation of fog or clouds meet in a region for us to deploy our solution or to collect it as a water source. So once we have these hotspots identified by our algorithm or fog spots, we set up the second unit of technology. It's called the water radar. And this is a set of sensors that measures the identified point and tells us how much water we're going to get from fog and clouds versus how much water from rain, what is the quality of the water, what are the estimated yields. We build a cost-benefit analysis for that particular point. And then the third unit, it's the fog collectors, which are these huge membranes with hydrophilic properties that once the fog or the cloud touches the membrane, it forces it to adhere. The droplets start building bigger and bigger until by gravity they fall into a gutter. And then depending on the application point, an irrigation system, a cistern, artificial water mass, greenhouse, filtration system, etc.
That is really helpful. And I think we can all visualize that, when you've had community gather on a fabric, if you go camping, that sort of thing on your tent, that it's collecting those droplets and pulling that all together. And I know a big part of your work is really looking at democratizing access to water. And I think that is a real reality of these different weather patterns. We're seeing it unfairly impacting certain communities over others. So how do you weave that value into the work that you're doing as well?
Yes, absolutely. So, keeping in mind the mission by which the whole Permalution story began in California, and what the main objective was, yes, we're very much aligned with democratizing or introducing a new water source to the world, and especially with the mindset of not leaving anyone behind. I know that it can get very tempting to sell to those who have the most money to sell it. We had situations where we could have just turned into another water bottle producing company, which it's not the main focus for us. We don't want to become a new problem to society. It's if we rethink the water bottles in a sustainable way and so on, it could be very interesting. We're trying to focus as much as possible as a startup. But yes, we make sure that our projects have an impact. We make sure that we also quantify and measure how it will affect future generations, how it will affect the ecosystems that we are affecting or impacting while developing or deploying our solutions in the terrain. So yes, it is very important for us. It's something that the whole executive team we have at heart. We were quite devastated to have some of our most impactful projects being put on hold because of the USAID, World Wildlife Foundation holds that happened at the Washington level since the beginning of the year. We are now thinking of opening our own foundation so we can fund our own projects for humanitarian ecosystem development, conservation, and so on, while focusing on projects for corporate ESG agendas and the big players and industries that need also our solution. So it's about finding that balance of, yes, being financially sustainable, but also leaving a better world behind.
It is really striking that balance, I think, for so many companies as we're trying to find these positive solutions, but at the same time, we need to stay afloat. So I think that's a beautiful balance that you're trying to strike there. Do you have any examples of any communities that you've worked with or success stories that you can share as well?
Yes, our success story, which was our first project, it's still running. It's in the process of getting expanded as well, was for conservation of wild orchids, in particular 2 species that are on the brink of extinction in Mexico because of all the induced wildfires from the illegal avocado plantations. And also because the little few ones that are left are being sold in the black market. So that is one of the problems we were solving with our solution. We set up our fog collectors in a natural protected area in Mexico with the forest department. We started reproducing these units of orchids, replacing them back into their ecosystem or natural habitat. We've been having a 75% rate of survival so far. And we have reinstated over 7,000 units, not only of these 2 orchids, but other ones too, back into their ecosystem. So we got a recommendation letter from the government. We heard some really nice stories that spawned from that project as well. Now we are getting a request for an expansion, and we're looking to replicate it also for other regions and ecosystems that can use another water source to combat the problems that they are facing.
Oh, that's incredible. There's so many layers to that challenge as well. And this is definitely, we have a lot of our listeners who are either business leaders or entrepreneurs, and we do create a safe space where we can share some challenges on this podcast. What would you say has been one of your current challenges that you're facing? It could be technological, or it sounds maybe from a funding perspective based on current legislation. Like, what is one of the challenges that you're facing, and are there any learnings from that you could share with our listeners that maybe if they're going through something similar?
One of the challenges for us is that water is a very highly regulated industry. So we have to be very careful how we approach our market entry and be very the risk of our technology as much as we can. Work with the right people and departments at government so we can do our first installation in a determined or a new region. For example, in the US, one of our big challenges is that in many states, it's illegal to collect rainwater. And in California, you can only collect what falls on the rooftop, and the rest belongs to the government. So when we started in the US, there were farmers that were saying, can you make sure we don't get our technology taken away, we don't get fines or like put in jail or something like it could happen with rain. So we had to prove that unlike rain, if we don't collect the fog, it goes back into the atmosphere by temperature change, we lose it. So we need to collect it so it can be reestablished back. Nowadays, there's less than 5% of the tree mass that can do the job of reintroducing fog and clouds back into the ecosystem. And if you want to discuss of why it's illegal to collect rain in the United States, I can give some information on that. So 75% of the West Coast in the United States gets their water from groundwater pumping. So groundwater extraction. And the only way to replenish those basins is through rain. And each year they get less than 10% of the replenishment they need. So they are trying to keep every drop for replenishment of the aquifers. So that's one of the main reasons. But it's still, when we try to get somewhere and we see that this is the situation, it is quite a challenge to overcome.
Understood. But that just demonstrates, I think, further the benefit of working with fog, because to your point, it would not go down at that level. It would go just back up to the clouds. Interesting. And are you working on any projects at the moment? I'm sure all your projects are fascinating, but are you working on any special projects right now that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, so we set up at the beginning of the year, we set up our first project in the Middle East, in Abu Dhabi. So we are in the middle of nowhere in the desert, and we've been collecting water successfully. Our membranes, they don't take energy to run, so we can go in fully remote areas. And that has been a very successful case. We are literally making history. There's been a lot of studies on the fog of the Emirates and so on, but the first fog water collection project has been deployed by us. It took a lot of effort, and we had our champion over there that helped us also get to prove that our technology is very adaptable and necessary for those regions as well. So our project with this utility company in the Middle East was it's so far it's been a successful project. And one of the projects I'm really excited about, it's a new application we're doing. We're starting this year. We're still tapping into floating water, but now we're doing industrial steam recycling, starting with data centers. So it's doing naturally horizontal occurring fog. We're starting now with vertically induced steam. And from the cooling towers of the data centers, we recycle it and put it back for operation.
That is fascinating. I mean, we've spoken to a few data center leaders on this podcast, and I mean, the computing power is just exploding to a point where we're just trying to keep up from, I come from the world of cooling those spaces, and we know that we used to cool at the data center level, and then it was in the room level, and then it was at the rack level, and now it's at the individual unit level that we're having to, because it's so powerful. But water is such an important part of that. And I know also from our listeners, again, they're more coming from that entrepreneurial space. Another topic we've had a few questions on is, as people are looking to generate funding or support, financial support, especially in the clean tech space, it certainly seems to ebb and flow depending on, I guess, some political alignment, but also just kind of what is trendy, if you will. How would you recommend our listeners approach it, maybe in general? And then do you have any approaches that you also lean into when it comes to times like we are right now, where maybe the economy is not doing as well, it might be a little bit less stable? Is there any messaging or approach that you lean into that has worked for you and that you would recommend to others?
Yes, absolutely. From the top of my head, there are two main comments on that. So first, something I would like to tell my younger entrepreneur self when she started this whole Permalution journey, and I was focusing on having the right logo, the right image, the right website, the right tagline, make sure that everything looks pretty, that the MVP makes sense, that the whole technical aspect. I realized that everything changed when we got our first sale. If I could tell entrepreneurs to focus on something, is focus on your first sale. When we got our first sale, the tables turned completely. So we were offered the funding. Like, it was so much easier to get grants to match the project that we were doing and so on, show that traction investment wise. So if I could go back and do things different, well, I'm very happy how everything has turned, but if there's any area of improvement, which there tends to be, yes, I would focus more on getting that first sale done than making sure everything looks pretty and everything is perfect. And also in terms of grants, here in Canada and in Quebec, we have wonderful opportunities for entrepreneurs, for business support. And some of this support, yes, it takes time to build. There are some entrepreneurs that tell me, well, I don't have the bandwidth to start, applying for funding at this level or a federal government or so on, or I don't know who I'm going to hire. But starting in advance and looking what the timelines look like, what the requirements look like, see ahead. Usually I would look ahead 3 months before I hire someone, or 6 months, so I can have the right grant funding structure. So having that ahead and having a good mapping of what fundings are going on, what are the timelines, what are the budgets, interest, and have that aligned with our calendars of project deployment, of what we're going to do, our pilots that are coming up, and so on. That has been key to surviving some longer sales cycles that tend to happen in the mining sector, water sector. And we were able to tough them out because we had the right support from the government. Then we were able to prove that traction as well, and it keeps building into a virtuous cycle. And also something that I would have liked to know a little bit more or focus more is to quantify the problem, not only the solution, and in terms of how we compare to other solutions and cost and all that it's very important. But when we talk the mining sector and how much it costs them to have a lawsuit regarding like a water source that got contaminated, or a community that got their water source contaminated, when we started real comparisons in terms of how much our technology de-risked that type of consequences, that also changed the way our technology was seen, not only in what they can gain, but the problems that they can avoid.
That's brilliant. And I think that also maybe de-risks it as well from you're not doing this just out of the kindness of your heart, not you personally, but these companies you're partnering with. That I think sometimes the sustainability lens can feel that it's just maybe a little virtuous. However, if you can actually show the business value of de-risking, providing different revenue sources, it absolutely encourages buy-in, regardless of where we are in the interest cycle, I think, at that higher level. That's fascinating. Your expertise is also shined through in a different way, in that you, beyond founding one company, you've also founded another organization called Tech Quiero. Can you speak to the genesis behind that and what made you want to create that?
Yes, absolutely. So, well, after I spent my year in California, well, my backpacking trip in California that was supposed to be 2-3 weeks ended up in being a whole year. I started the business, got into accelerators, started some traction, but at the end of the day, it was very hard for me to advance as a Canadian in the US, getting the installation permits, grants, and so on. So I came back home and I got offered a job in Mexico through Global Affairs Canada. So it was a 1-year contract in Mexico. I took it. I used to work for the federal government before going to to California. I spent 1 year working with the metropolitan government, doing projects, turning vacant lots into green spaces, into urban gardens. I developed an app to exchange, with a whole team that worked with me, and it was like an app to exchange fruits and veggies from gardens, and like a Tinder, but for fruits and veggies, things like that. And then I got offered a job at Bosch, Mexico, and at their innovation center in Guadalajara. And once I started working in more technical solutions and technical teams, I realized that I was often the only woman. I had a meeting with 14 men, engineers, and me. And at some point I was like, here it's very clear that there's a lack of representation in Latin America. I learned that women in Latin America, they represent 13 to 16% of the programmers in the region or in the country. So I said, I'm going to start something for the women who are not in tech. I know there are communities for women who are engineers, women who are in design, programming. So we're the 85%, almost 90, who are not in tech. So I started this community, Tech Quiero, in Mexico. And the first event, I set up a Facebook event, first event I held by myself, which was how to set up a marketing strategy using social media. Over 100 women came to the event. I realized there was something there. That same event, I met some of my team members that are still with me here. We ended up opening 3 chapters in Mexico in 3 different cities, reaching over 4,000 women so far. We opened the Montreal chapter here, the Sherbrooke chapter here in Quebec as well. And yes, we have reached over 900 women in the region. And we're growing here in Canada as well. So it's part of what makes my heart sing and balances sometime the meaning of things and keeps some light in my life working with this amazing women and creating impact in the ecosystem.
Your impact is clearly shining through on so many different levels. I am curious as to what is your hope for Permalution going forward, or maybe just water harvesting overall? It sounds like you're playing in different spaces, but as you look a midterm, what is your hope and aspiration there?
So we have like this big ambitious goal with our team. We say we want to impact 5 million people in the next 5 years.
Wow.
And if we translate that into how it looks in the water harvesting objectives, let's say, we would like in the next 5 years be harvesting or collecting 100 million tons of water around the world. So introducing this water source, democratizing it. So that's our goal that we see for Permalution, and have it as a point of reference for anything cloud and fog water collection technology around the world.
I love how concrete and ambitious that is, but it's such a vision to all work towards. I'm sure when you're rallying your team around that as well. Has this always been something that you've wanted to do from the sustainability lens? It sounds like you kind of had that aha moment when you were in California. Prior to that, I guess, did you know that you wanted to be an entrepreneur? And more specifically, did you always have this tug towards something maybe more in the sustainability space?
So, yes, I did know I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Well, I didn't grow up thinking I would be an entrepreneur, but both my parents are engineers, entrepreneurs. They built the first or one of the first internet companies in the little town where we used to live in Argentina before moving to Canada over 20 years ago. And it was common for me to see them both coming late at night, like working on the projects, going on the weekends to the business and playing while they were working. And I found that so cool. I remember looking at my mom and saying, my mom is really cool. She's like this woman, like rocking, telling people what to do. So yes, I had that role model. It wasn't something strange for me. It made a lot of, it came very naturally. And for the sustainability part, I would say also yes. With my family, we always lived in very nature surrounded spaces. We never lived in big cities or anything like that. My parents were always involved in initiatives also to give back to the community. I was always been fascinated by water, by everything water, big masses of water. They always attracted me. I knew I wanted to work in something water, but I didn't know what. And then everything kind of made sense and the universe brought it all together. And here I am.
Such a great role model. And I'm sure you are now being a role model to many others behind you. It can certainly be super inspiring being an entrepreneur and carving out your own path. And then you're talking about some of the challenges before. I'm sure it's not always the easiest. Have you personally found any tools or tricks that help you maybe stay elevated in all of it? It sounds like maybe some of it is working with your incredible community that you built with Tech Quiero, but is there other pieces or tips or tools that you've built up over the years?
Yes, let me think. If I would see how I have changed throughout the years, I would say that I take things more calmly. I remember in the first years when we were setting up projects, let's say in Mexico, or talking with potential clients, and they will always ask me, when is the boss coming? Okay, when is your boss coming? It's like it's the third time that it's just that it's smooth. And at this point, I'm like, well, I can bring my dad if you want to see a male figure. Like,
Oh my gosh.
I don't take it as personal anymore, and I don't get caught in I choose my battles better, let's say, and not take things personal. That's a big one. Having an amazing team, that's also another one, because I know that I bounce around all my decisions, my thoughts with my team. I have their input, and I know that whatever decision I make, they are backing me up, and that we're together on this. And that it's also something I'm very grateful for, and I feel very proud that I managed to build such a wonderful team that I can really trust and that we see in the same direction. And having those moments for oneself, I keep a journal of all the things we accomplish, because it's hard to forget everything we accomplish, especially the entrepreneurial mind. We're also always focusing what's the next deal, and we don't take the time to realize how far we've come, what this new landscape we're looking in, like, and the pleasure of sometimes being in the moment and say, wow, I know that I want to reach a lot more, but at some point I wish to be here too. So that it's also one of my good practices, because yeah, sometimes the world can become overwhelming, and it's totally fine to have moments where we cry, or feel all the feelings, have the cry, and then put our own two hands in the floor, we get up and we keep going.
Well, I know I could ask you a million more questions, and I know our listeners are going to want to learn more about you and your business and your organization. Where would you recommend that they go and check out?
Either our website, www.permalution.com, like a permanent solution, Permalution. And also on LinkedIn, we are posting all our recent awards, mention articles, features, and so on. That's where they can get the most updated information. And we are launching also a newsletter soon. They can subscribe through the website.
And I would love to pick your brain on this last question that we ask on every single episode, because I really think that you are demonstrating it and you're showing communities how to live it as well. But what do you think it will take for businesses and leaders to be resilient going forward?
I feel that a big reality check, which is kind of happening more and more for us, what we see in the water sector is that until people don't open the faucet and see there's no water coming out, they are not going to panic. And I can see that also at a larger scale. Yes, it's usually the governments that realize the lack of water, or the scarcity, or the impacts of not being resilient or sustainable. Now that we're seeing more and more clearly what that impact is, and the threat also of not being resilient, we see also a lot of interest now from national security, water resiliency programs from governments, and so on. Yes, unfortunately, we don't have to get to a big reality check, so we have to make the move, and we can see ahead and look at the patterns that we are creating and follow what it makes good sense and good business sense, or take the path of resiliency.
Well, it's such an important, inspiring conversation. As I mentioned at the top, our listeners love hearing about disruptors in this space. I think you're doing such a beautiful job at disrupting this space, and you're being recognized for it. And I think it is fantastic. So thank you so much for joining us, and especially thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you so much, Lauren, and thank you for having me, and a pleasure being here.
I hope that you've enjoyed this week's edition of the Resilience Report. If you would like to hear and see more, be sure to check out @The Resilience Report on YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until we connect again, remember, even on the darkest of days, we all have the opportunity to be a lighthouse for others as we collectively pursue better, more resilient business.